Awful fashion trends of the 2010s. If you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, then you may remember my very first foray into video essays, where I quickly covered some of my least favorite fashion trends from the early 2010s. In honor of it officially being the 1-year anniversary of that video, I thought it would be kind of fun to remake it, but better. This won't be an exact copy-paste of the Why the 2010s Were an Awful Time for Fashion video, but don't be surprised if you get hit with a sense of déjà vu. What must be noted about the fashions of the early to mid-2010s is that the fashion industry, as well as the world, was still reeling from the economic recession of the late 2000s. Certain trends that had been popular in pre-recession times, like giant designer bags and heavily monogrammed clothing, were now considered inappropriate and in bad taste. Luxury, high-end items were no longer seen as status symbols, but had become an indication that you were part of the 1% that continued to profit while others were struggling. In the post-recession era, the idea of frugality inadvertently wound up supporting the rise of fast fashion, and as a result, brands like Forever 21, American Apparel, H&M, and Urban Outfitters began to flourish. Trends were pushed out faster and faster, oversaturating the market and making people yearn for the next hot thing even sooner. On the other end of the spectrum, vintage clothing also became popular, as we can see well documented in Macklemore's thrift shop, and the stigma around shopping secondhand was greatly reduced. Because of social media, people developed a herd mentality, and there was less of an emphasis for experimentation or uniqueness, and even alternative fashion trends like grunge, hipsters, and Lolita were widely popular on social media and fell to capitalism. As much as you might hate it personally, there's no denying that the 2000s managed to create its own unique look, whereas the 2010s were so heavily influenced by trends of the past that the overall aesthetic of the decade is watered down and near unidentifiable. The internet and social media became a widely used tool to find fashion inspiration as well as digitally shop. You might remember the short-lived reign of We Heart It and Polyvore, but the real powerhouses were Pinterest, Tumblr, and Instagram, whose impact on style was undeniable during the decade. The early 2010s took most of its fashion inspiration from the 1980s and 1990s, as seen with the rise of studs, leather jackets, neon colors, sneakers, and skater skirts. While we spent the majority of the decade lamenting the fashion choices of the prior one, oh, the irony, the general style for the time period could be put into two broad categories. The bright and bold look that was about excess and fun, think of Katy Perry during her California Girls era or Nicki Minaj's early years, and on the opposite side of the spectrum we saw people toning down, with Nirvana, Arctic Monkeys, and Lana Del Rey appealing to a vintage, minimalistic Americana ideal. Obviously, there were smaller subsets of aesthetics that fell within these two categories, but the majority of trends could be placed in them. As someone who fell for quite a few 2010s trends hook, line, and sinker, I'm perfectly fine with poking fun at some of my own fashion choices and moving forward. If anyone watching this video is still wearing one of the trends we'll be discussing, relax. You're not being attacked. You will always have the ability to wear what you want to wear. Just understand that that might mean your outfit isn't what's considered fashionable or trendy right now. You'll just have to make your peace with that. And honestly, it's kind of inevitable. Look at any generation and how they adapt to changing trends. Some people will be ahead of the curve and others will lag behind. A classic example of the diffusion of innovation. The diffusion of innovation theory can be applied to numerous industries and ideas, but for the sake of today's conversation, we'll relate it to the fashion trend cycle. The theory of diffusion of innovation is the concept that ideas spread through participants in a social system before they are fully introduced into the mainstream. This is often split up into categories. First, the innovators, the smallest percent, the people who are in the know and ahead of the curve. They might look odd at first, but they'll be remembered as the originators of certain trends. Then it's the early adopters, people who saw what the innovators were doing and adjusted it in a way that made sense for their lifestyle. They're still considered icons in that sense and tend to be popular in relevant spaces. And they're often attributed to bringing mainstream attention to the trend. The early majority adopt the trend after it's proven to last longer than expected. The late majority are the stragglers, the people who didn't feel like investing in a trend until they felt like they were the odd man out. These individuals approach an innovation with a high degree of skepticism and fear. The laggards are the last to adopt innovation, as they're typically most adverse to change and also may not have the means to make them. So, if you're going out in your skinny jeans and Gladiator sandals and no one compliments your outfit, don't be offended. If someone in 2013 had been walking around in an Ed Hardy t-shirt and a denim miniskirt, would you have called them fashionable at that time? Probably not. Like pretty much everything, fashion is a cycle, and it's inevitable that something that was cute once won't be considered cute years later. And those items from the 2010s are what we're going to be talking about today. Let's get into it. The Lita Shoe.
Those shoes are ridiculous.
I mentioned these in the previous edition of this video, but now that I'm coming back to this with a fresh pair of eyes and less biases, I have some new thoughts to share. Released in July 2010, the Jeffrey Campbell Lita boots were as synonymous with the early 2010s as Uggs were to the 2000s. On YouTube, there were dozens of videos showcasing Jeffrey Campbell collections, and if you had a Tumblr account at any point, then odds are you saw at least one picture of this shoe a day. Like many popular trends of the 2010s, the Lita was so overwhelmingly popular that it quickly got duped by fast fashion brands, and everyone from H&M to Forever 21 began selling similar block-heeled boots. During the height of their popularity, you could find the chunky shoes in over 100 different designs, including black, glitter, tan, hot pink, galaxy print, and of course, completely covered in studs. Overall, the chunky lace-up silhouette isn't the worst thing in the world. It's essentially a 1970s-inspired platform that takes notes from a more utilitarian 90s combat boot. With proper styling, you might be able to make a cute contemporary outfit with them. But as someone who was around during their initial popularity and owned quite a few pairs, it'll be near impossible to not associate them with the dated styles of the early 2010s. For those of you with a pair or two of Litas still hiding in the back of your closet, don't go throwing them out. With towering platforms coming back into style and 1970s fashion trends on the rise, there's a high chance that these shoes will become a fashion staple all over again. But as someone who no longer has the energy or the balance I did a decade ago, I'm afraid I'll have to cheer you on from afar. The Wedge Sneaker. Platform sneakers had been all the rage in the 90s and early 2000s, but fell out of favor for other styles by the late 2000s. In the 2010s, the look was revitalized by Isabel Marant with the Beckett sneaker in 2010 and the Willow sneaker in 2013. These wedge sneakers became a must-have item for celebrities, models, and fashion bloggers of the time, and soon enough the style became too popular for its own good, with dozens of brands creating their own heeled sneakers in an attempt to capitalize on the trend. Influenced by black streetwear and the rising athleisure trend, the wedge sneakers were meant to effortlessly elongate the leg while still being casual and comfortable. I think they're absolutely hideous, and I hope we never bring them back. The heelless shoe. I will never know why we wanted to look like horses. High fashion brands like Alexander McQueen and Jean-Paul Gaultier featured the heelless, or the cantilever, shoe on the runway, while celebrities like Lady Gaga wore them out on the streets. Like many shoe trends of the time period, the idea was copied by more affordable brands, and by the mid-2010s, you were guaranteed to spot at least one heelless shoe at any nightclub or celebratory party. Your first thought may be, how the hell were people walking around in those? And as someone who owned a pair, allow me to explain. You would simply put all of your weight and pressure on the ball of your foot, which honestly you had to do when walking in a lot of heels around that time anyway. It's not as complicated as it looks. The Valentino Rock Stud. Studded and spiked details were all the rage in the early 2010s, and no high-end brand embraced it more wholeheartedly than Valentino. In 2010, the Italian brand released their edgy shoes on the runway, and anyone who was going for the rocker chic look fell in love. Coming in a variety of colors, the pointed-toe shoes could be found in both a kitten heel and a flat silhouette, becoming a must-have item for any fashionista. As per usual, lookalikes sprung up and studded heels were as crucial to a going-out look as a bandage dress. Gladiator Sandals. Taking notes from the boho chic movement, Gladiator sandals became a crucial part of festival fashion in the 2010s. One of my least favorite shoe trends, I found the strappy shoes a pain to put on and even more of a pain to actually wear. For a wide-footed girl with flat arches, I was guaranteed to not only get severe blisters if I wore Gladiator sandals, but also some absurd tan lines. They could maybe look good if you were going for an all-out flower child look, but even then, it looked kinda silly. Jeggings. Did you forget about these? 'Cause I sure as hell didn't. The jean legging hybrid initially rose in popularity as a response to the rising skinny jean trend of the late 2000s. While originally a simple made-for-TV concept, you probably remember the late-night infomercials, they became a worldwide phenomenon as a comfortable and affordable pant alternative. Made mostly out of stretchy spandex, jeggings were designed to resemble jeans of the time, complete with fake pockets and belt loops. People wore jeggings everywhere, to school, to the gym, to work. And while I was never fond of them, I can understand the appeal they may have had for people who might not have been able to fit into a more rigid skinny jean. Colored skinny jeans. I'm on team no skinny jeans at all, but I guess I can compromise by saying that the brightly colored ones are the worst of the bunch. I'm not saying that the rise of this trend is girls' generation's fault, but I'm not saying that either. For those of you who are still firmly on board the skinny jean train, might I suggest at least trying some other silhouettes? Bandage dresses.
I mean, does it feel
Can
tight?
you breathe?
Breathing is a bit unnecessary. The idea is to look hot.
You're not really supposed to eat in that dress anyway.
No eating, no breathing.
In the 2010s, figure-hugging dresses became all the rage, with curvier body types beginning to replace the heroin chic look as the beauty standard. And no bodycon was more popular than the bandage dress by Hervé Léger. Named after its distinctive wrapped bandage look, which, yes, sometimes made the wearer look like a mummy, the dress was ultra-tight and hyper-femme. Dozens of celebrities from Rihanna to Victoria Beckham to Miranda Kerr wore the dress on the red carpet, and soon enough it became the party dress of the early 2010s. Released in a wide range of colors, the bandage dress could easily walk the line between tacky and tasteful. I'm partial to it in a solid color. With stripes, it can be a bit crazy to look at. But overall, I can't be bothered to wear something I can't eat in. You might remember Christina Aguilera wearing this dress in Burlesque, and it lives in my mind rent-free. The high-low. The asymmetric skirt trend, commonly known as the high-low or the waterfall, was a staple in both fast fashion and high fashion and continues to be seen today, unfortunately. Unlike asymmetry in the 2000s, which would go from side to side instead of front to back, high-low skirts and dresses often wound up making garments look unfinished and incomplete, and had the rather unflattering side effect of making people's legs look shorter. I couldn't be happier that we've switched back to 2000s asymmetry, because the one-shoulder look is hot, even if it's bad for my tan lines. Skater skirts. The high-waisted circle skirt is perhaps the most popular trend of the 2010s. Every single person owned at least one skater skirt or dress, and it continues to have a hold on some people even to this day. Made in nearly every color and every fabric, skater skirts initially rose in popularity for being modest in comparison to the miniskirts of the 2000s. They also were widely considered to be flattering on any and all body types. Unlike many other trends of the 2010s, skater skirts weren't limited to a single aesthetic and could be worn with a wide range of clothing, making them the ultimate basic. Contrary to popular belief, the skater skirt is not called that because of skateboarding, but because of ice skating. In the 1980s, ice skating was not only a popular pastime, but also a popular spectator sport. And as a result, the round skating skirts women wore on the ice became trendy in fashion. As mentioned, the 80s were a huge influence when it came to early 2010s style. The fact that the skater skirt is basically a shortened version of the 1950s poodle skirt no doubt appealed to the hipster rockabilly Americana aesthetic, and it was inevitable that it would come back into fashion. They're not the worst thing in the world, but come on, there are so many cuter skirt options out there. I can't think of a single outfit with a skater skirt that wouldn't be made cuter with a midi slip skirt or a standard pleated skirt. Harem pants. Another revitalization of an 80s fashion trend, the drop crotch or parachute pants or harem pants were a comfortable style that was immensely popular with men and women alike. While not a terrible silhouette for loungewear, although it isn't very flattering on the booty, the fact that these would often be worn as dress pants with heels is just beyond me. Distressed denim. With the popularity of vintage clothing in the 2010s, denim began to take on a more rugged and worn-in look. Companies began manufacturing rips and tears into their jeans, and what started off as a subtle, wearable trend became an all-out joke, with pants and shorts looking like they went through a shredder. You might even remember your parents asking if you paid for your pants to look like that. Out of the many trends on this list, distressed denim is one of the least offensive, but can we at least admit to ourselves that we took it too far? Acid wash. The 80s hit us hard once again. With the rise of denim, we began to see experimentation with the textile, and the tie-dye-esque acid wash returned in full force. I remember owning an acid wash skater skirt that I wore at least twice a week. Paired with a neon crop top and sneakers, it baffles me that anyone thought the decade was all about the 90s when we were clearly parodying the 80s. Slogan Tops. Back in the 2010s, slogan tees and tanks were all the rage, often featuring some silly saying or ridiculous buzzword. Although they could often be a simple DIY, luxury brands were also a part of the trend, pushing out simple slogan tees for ridiculous prices. Honestly, they were asking to be knocked off. At least slogan tops are mostly back where they belong as workout or loungewear. 2000s inspired slogan tops have begun making the rounds again, and I'm not sure why or how, but they actually managed to look cute in this context. I think it has a lot to do with the silhouette itself, tighter and more cropped, as well as the phrases themselves being more cheeky than cringy. Bustiers.
What is she wearing? She's practically got nothing on. She's in her bra.
Abraham, it's not just her bra. It's one of those things, you know, like all the girls are wearing.
Marcela.
It's a bustier.
Bustiquela. It's her bra. Look at it.
Crop tops reigned supreme over the majority of the 2010s, largely thanks to the revitalization of the high-rise silhouette and an increase in body positivity. One of the earliest iterations of the crop top trends was the bustier, which was often worn with skater skirts, thigh highs, and Litas for the ultimate 2010s look. While some attribute this to the 90s underwear as outerwear trend, it's honestly more similar to Madonna's style in the 80s. See a theme here? The Triangle Bikini. You've got to remember these. Invented by Australian brand Triangle, the bright and bold bikinis took over beach bodies worldwide. Known for their signature neon color block design, the swimsuits made a huge splash after appearing on Beyoncé, Miley Cyrus, and Kendall Jenner. After looking at some of the other 80s-inspired trends on this list, it feels only natural that our swimwear would feature similar design choices, and I definitely think this will be identified as one of the most 2010s trends around. Flower crowns. We could blame Coachella or Lana Del Rey or Tumblr, but either way, this was a thing. While not necessarily a bad trend in the right context, it is pretty weird that we were just walking around with plastic flower crowns on our heads for no reason. I've recently seen this make a comeback on TikTok within the cottagecore and fairy aesthetics, but a large part of what makes it work in those contexts is that it seems to be self-aware. In the 2010s, we were just wearing flower crowns because it was rebloggable. It's also important to note that this trend is one of many in the 2010s that was taking clothing from another culture and watering it down to be cheaply mass-produced. Chevron. The zigzag print was everywhere in the early 2010s, and not just in fashion, but in interior design as well. It's important to note that the popularity of chevron, as well as other tribal prints, is a prime example of cultural appropriation in fashion. In the 2010s, indigenous culture was marketed and capitalized on by the very people who set out to destroy it in the first place, with very little given back to the community. You might not think it's a big deal, but the normalization of fashion designers stealing from cultures they aren't a part of is how you wind up with white women wearing indigenous headdresses as fashion. Animals. Owls, sloths, foxes, pugs, you name it, they were on clothing. I was never into the pug thing, their health problems made me sad, but I was definitely an owl girl. I had a huge collection of owl rings and necklaces that I was very proud of, and one of my favorite sweaters at the time was completely covered in foxes, which yes, got very annoying to wear after this song came out. Galaxy. We took this way too far. There were Galaxy hoodies, coffee mugs, blankets, dresses, leggings. Pretty much anything could be made to look like a galaxy. Unlike other times in fashion like the 60s space craze or Y2K futurism, this push towards an otherworldly aesthetic seemingly came from nowhere. To this day, I still wince when I see something with purple galaxy print. Mustaches. What may have begun as a way to spread awareness about men's health issues became one of the cringiest fashion trends of the 21st century. Elaborate facial hair began to make appearances in men's fashion, largely due to the hipster and lumberjack aesthetics, while cartoonish mustaches were featured on tops, necklaces, and sunglasses. I genuinely don't know what we were thinking. Skulls and crosses. Introduced as part of the soft grunge/rocker chic aesthetic, skulls and crosses became a massively popular motif in clothing during the 2010s. Although it had its roots as an alternative fashion trend, they were widely accepted by nearly everyone, with skulls and crosses appearing on everything from rompers to scarves to dresses. Emoji print. I really have nothing to say about this except why. Crackle nail polish. I was way too into this trend back in the day and did some of the most heinous color combinations imaginable. I much prefer the more abstract and adorable nail art of today. What are your thoughts on 2010s fashion? Were there any trends that I forgot about? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!